Hey everyone, this is Ben Botkin, and today I want to talk a little bit about MIDI study packs. So what is a MIDI study pack? Well, basically it is an educational experience centered around a piece of music that I have composed and produced with virtual instruments. They retail at $25 a piece. Sometimes they're on sale for less. And each one comes with MIDI files, comes with Cubase project files, a finished audio file for reference, wave stems based on instrumental section, a multi-page study PDF with notes and ideas for things you can try to observe or to learn on your own. And it also comes with a video, or a link to a video rather, which includes a little bit of a breakdown of the piece and also some of the library that I am using. So why MIDI study packs? How did that start? Well, a few years ago, I started to get emails from people saying, hey, I really like your music. Do you have the orchestral score that I could access and learn from? And I would have to say, well, I'm not a real orchestral composer. Most of my stuff I'm working on in a DAW with MIDI and samples. So I have MIDI, but I'm sorry, I don't have any full orchestral scores. And then I would hear back with, well, okay, but can I access your MIDI? At least I can learn from that. And as I thought of the idea of using MIDI as an educational foundation in lieu of having the orchestral scores, I started to realize there's some things you can actually do a little bit better with MIDI files, or they give you more insights into some things and have the potential to be even more interactive than an orchestral score. That's because in MIDI, you can see things like note velocity, expression and modulation curves, and humanized note start points, note endpoints, and note durations. So in addition to being a great tool for learning about orchestration and composition, a MIDI study pack that's based on the MIDI or project files of a piece of music can also be a great learning platform for increasing your MIDI mockup skills, because it can show some of those nuanced aspects of performance with sample libraries. So what can you learn from a MIDI study pack, and what are they good for? Who can use them? Well, let's open one up and take a little look. Right now we're looking at MIDI Study Pack 9, which is called On Top of the World. And this one was created primarily with Orchestral Tools Metropolis Arc 5 library. It's kind of an inspiring piece. And in this case, since I'm a Cubase user, I went ahead and opened up the Cubase project file. I could have opened the MIDI, in which case I would go up here, say File, Import, MIDI file. And that would show me all the same information except for, let's open this up here. If I expand the volume automation lanes, I haven't figured out a way to get the volume automation data from Cubase into the MIDI. So let's collapse that again. If you're going to use the MIDI file, you'll have all the notes, you'll have all the note velocity, you'll have the track names, you'll have all the CC curve data to work with. You'll have almost everything, but you won't have that volume automation, which I'm using to do a little bit extra mixing detail. But you'll still have a lot of information. Also, if you use the Cubase project file, you will get to see the mixer view. But usually in these tracks, I'm not doing much in the mixer view in terms of adding effects or doing a lot of EQ. So you're also, if you're just using the MIDI file, you're also not going to be missing much there. So when you open up your MIDI file or your Cubase project file, the tracks will appear like this, and you will actually need to assign instruments to each track to be able to hear it. It shouldn't sound initially. So if you have the same library, in this case Metropolis Arc 5, you can go ahead, open the appropriate player, and open the right patch. And I've tried to label these carefully so you know exactly what patch it is. And once you assign the instruments, if you have the same libraries, it should sound something like this. Now, once you're inside the project and you have the instruments loaded up, there are a number of things you can do to use this as an educational tool. One is to, let's open up some MIDI. Take a look. One of the things you can do is open it up, observe voicing, and see principles of instrument blending. You can see things I'm doing in the arrangement and the orchestration. You can look at everything all together. If you want, you can open up just one section. Here we go. That's the brass. Let's move that to velocity. You can also see how I'm using things like velocity for patches that are velocity triggered. So why is this note, did I hit this note louder than the next? Like over here. You also can see note starts, notes ends, note durations, and you might notice not everything is totally quantized or totally clean. And sometimes that's to accommodate for the natural sample delay of these samples, but sometimes it's to add some humanization, and there's even things you can learn from that. An obvious advantage of using the MIDI over an orchestral score, now there isn't an orchestral score for this piece out there, but is I think it's pretty obvious, and that is if you're not able to read music or you're not comfortable reading it, you can jump into this right away and visually see what's going on. And maybe this is just me and what I'm used to, but I think in some ways it's easier to see voicing in this view all laid out than it is in an orchestral score, because you see every note exactly where it is, just all lined up. And if there's a big gap in the voicing when you want it to be really full, you can see, oh, it's right there. And if you've got a wrong note in a chord, it's not doing what you want, you can see, oh, that's not going to work. So I love being able to just open up and see these overviews. Now, one of the things that I think is fun, once you have this MIDI opened up and you've got your instruments loaded, is to move things around a little bit. Maybe assign parts to different instruments, maybe change octave on things, and just see how the effect is changed. So let's see, what do we have here? Here's our brass. Let's take a look. Focus in on just the brass for right now. We have some flugelhorns here, which are sort of like low trumpets. Let's see, will they go an octave higher? That's going to be pushing it, I think. Yeah, it is. But we could move these inner voice parts, we could move them an octave higher, and then they'll be an octave. They'll be above our melody. Let's see, how does that sound? Let's see, what if we did the same? What if we changed? We got this big strings ensemble patch. What happens if we move this up an octave? How does it change the sound? But keep the bass low. Like that. Now, because we have these notes above the melody, we might need to make the melody a little bit louder. Now, what if we give someone else the melody? Let's put it on this, we got this flute and violins over here. Let's put it on him. We've also got, push that out of the way. We've got this horns and Shelley. I want to move this. up an octave, because we can do that. So that's interesting. So it gives you opportunities to move things around, change voicing, even move it to an entirely different instrumental section and see how it sounds. So that's a fun thing you can do. Just move it all around, manipulate it, play with it. And sometimes that'll give you ideas for blends or voicing structures that maybe you hadn't thought about before. Now, each MIDI study pack also comes with a multi-page PDF study guide, which will give you a little bit of information on how to use your MIDI pack, how to use the included files, a little bit of information on the libraries and articulations that this piece will be using. And then I have a few points of learning that are based on this piece. Here's one about using octaves, doubling in octaves. Here's one about using a bass pulse, which is a technique I love to use to give a momentum and to fill out the lower end of a piece. And so every MIDI study pack is going to have a few pages of orchestration, composition, instruction, or ideas for things to try with this MIDI to get a little bit more out of it. Now, one of the most frequent questions I get is, Ben, is there any value in me getting the MIDI study pack if I don't have the specific library or libraries that you're using to create your piece? And the reality is most people are not going to have the exact same library or libraries that I have. Now, in my opinion, there's actually more value you can get out of a MIDI study pack if you don't have the exact same libraries that they have, because what you'll have to do is open the project and then find a close analog to that patch using what you already have. And this can do several things. This can actually help familiarize you with the instruments you have. This might show you some things that can be done with your instruments that maybe you didn't realize they could do. I had someone say the other day, he was realizing he could get basic sustain patch samples to sound pretty good, and he was using an entirely different library. So what I have here is I loaded the same piece, but I decided, what if I go ahead and replace every instrument with a different library? So in this case, I thought I would use Orchestral Tools Berlin Orchestra, which was created with Berkeley. And this is a little bit of a leaner, sort of all-in-one library. So what I tried to do is replace the patches, the Metropolis Arc patches, with these wherever I could. There were a few places where they didn't do exactly the same thing, so I approximated it a little bit. If you're going to try to recreate a piece with your own instrument libraries, one thing you might appreciate is that every MIDI study pack also comes with wave stems of the piece using the library that I'm using. So if you listen to just the stems, it should sound exactly like the finished piece. But what that means is you can also compare your section to that individual stem. So in this case, I'm going to listen to just the brass that I made with the Berkeley, replacement sounds. How's it sound? All right, how does that sound compared to just the brass? surprisingly close, actually. And these are flugelhorns in the Metropolis arc, and these are just trumpets. So as you're constructing each section, you can refer back to the stem if you like, or you can even use these stems to do a little bit of mixing practice on your own, just for fun. Another thing you can do with a MIDI study pack is especially if you buy one of the packs that has a particularly full orchestral piece, it's using a lot of strings, a lot of winds, brass, percussion, etc. You can actually use that as a springboard for balancing your own orchestral template. So if you're using My MIDI, you can actually drop that into your template and listen to it all together, and certain things should pop out as being, not blending nicely reverb wise, or some things being too loud or too soft. And you can use the MIDI information to actually help you create a balanced template. Let's see how this sounds. We'll mute the stems, and this is the same MIDI but with totally different libraries. Berkeley didn't have any synths, and it didn't have any choirs, so I went with the Metropolis Arc 2 choir, and I kept the analog synth sounds from Metropolis Arc 5 just because I'm lazy. I didn't look for a replacement. Okay, so for the most part, a totally different library. And there was a lot of things that could have been cleaned up, could sound better. I didn't do much mixing. I mostly just replaced. I made a couple of tweaks, but the essence of it is pretty similar, even though this is an entirely different library. And I could spend more time if I want to get it sounding as close as possible to the piece. I could just spend more time comparing these strings to comparing these strings, saying, okay, how do I get these sounding more mellow, or how do I get these sounding more broad, or how do I match reverb? If you want to do that, you can, and it's a fantastic ear exercise. And as you do this, you might discover that, oh, hey, the instruments I have are actually pretty good. I don't necessarily need to go out and buy the next latest, greatest library. If I just use them in a similar way, they can actually sound pretty great. So I hope you can see at this point that a MIDI study pack makes for a pretty flexible learning experience. Given that there's a lot of different kinds of assets, you can kind of pick how you want to learn with it and get value out of it in the best way for you. So if these sound like interesting products to you, I'll go ahead and include a link to my store down below. At present, there are 9 MIDI study packs. Each one retails for $25, but for the next 2 weeks, I'm having a 40% off sale on all my MIDI study pack products, except for number 6, which is only $2, so an extra special promotional deal. So for the next 2-ish weeks, each pack is $15. I have a bundle of numbers 1 through 7, and that's 40% off at $75. So if you're interested, I'll have the links for those below. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, I'd appreciate a like, or subscribe if you want to follow me for more educational tips and videos that I make in the future. Thank you so much for watching, and you have a great day.